Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys are excited for today's virtual tour. We'll be starting in a few minutes to allow some people to keep moving in, and yeah, we'll be getting started soon. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our virtual tour for the Yale Peabody Museum. I hope you guys are all excited to meet the monsters of the Mesozoic era. Feel free to use the chat if you want to make any comments or anything like that. And also, we have a separate section for the questions and answers that we can answer throughout the tour and at the end of the tour. Um, uh, if you guys know what monsters are from the Mesozoic era, feel free to chat that. And we'll have Armand give us the tour of some different fossils that we have at the Peabody.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Adam. Welcome to one of the collection rooms that's here associated with the Peabody for vertebrate paleontology. So these are backboned animal fossils, mostly dinosaurs in this room. There's a couple of mammals as well. This is a wonderful way of storing fossils. These are called compactor shelves. And you can see there's a variety of shelves throughout the room, and they house all of this material. Because they're fossils, these are bones that have turned into rock, or mostly a composite with a lot of rock in them, and they're very, very heavy. But it's easy to move materials around by a simple pulley system, and so you can move thousands of pounds very, very easily. So this makes it terrific for researchers that are coming here and doing some science investigations of a variety of fossils. Now, one of the reasons that Peabody Museum has so many fossils of dinosaurs is because of this person. This is O.C. Marsh. He was a Yale student. He graduated in 1860, and he came back in 1866 and started a career as a vertebrate paleontologist. So he was one of the, I think he's the first person to work for a university as someone who's a vertebrate paleontologist and studied fossil animal bones. Lucky for Marsh and for Yale, he had a very wealthy uncle named George Peabody, and George Peabody gave a gift to Yale University in 1866 to start the museum, and that's why it's called the Peabody Museum. So let's take a look at one of Marsh's discoveries. Between the 1870s through the 1890s, Marsh collected and named and investigated numerous fossil animals. And in these particular rows that are in this hallway, we find Apatosaurus, so the dinosaur Apatosaurus, which is a sort of like a counterpart to our Brontosaurus that was on display in the Great Hall upstairs. So Apatosaurus is a very close relative. It's one of those giant animals with the big long neck, long tail, and those kind of big giant four pillar-like limbs. And so this specimen was collected in Colorado. And if you notice on the shelves here, we have these identifying tags. And the numbers at the top means the 21 refers to the room that we're in. We're in room 21. This is column 18. This is the fourth shelf. And so that's from the top to the top down, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then A through G means that there are about 7 different specimens here for study, which might be a single bone, or it could refer to a collection of very fragments of bone. And as I said, all of this is Apatosaurus. Let's take a look at one of the large bones that was discovered from this particular specimen. And this is a vertebra. This is a piece of the backbone. You have to imagine this is upright, and that the tail would be one direction, and toward the neck it had to be another direction. And these centra, these pieces of the backbone, would fit together. And so this would be, similar to the little bumps that you feel in your back, where you have those little bumps where you can feel the individual bones in your back, and that would be this part, right? And that would stick up that direction. And then right here, just as you can show, there's a hole right there. And that runs all the way from the back of the head. So that's a hole right there. And that runs all the way from the back of the skull. And that's where the spinal cord would go out through the neck, through the back, and through the tail. This particular specimen was illustrated by one of Marsh's collectors. And this is the discovery of this particular specimen of Apatosaurus. And we think that that image right there is this particular bone that we were just looking at. So one of the vertebra there. And this painting was done by Arthur Lakes, who was collecting for Marsh. And so we have a record not only of where the specimen came from, but it gives you some idea of what it was like taking the bones out of this hillside here. And this is a little picture of Arthur Lakes. And the museum has a series of these images for various bones that were collected with Lakes for Marsh. So Marsh, this was 1877, and Marsh named the animal Apatosaurus, which means deceptive lizard, 1877. The other bone that's here, you see that bone right there, that's a sacrum, and that is here. So this is a very large bone. Sacrum, we have sacrum, so if you followed your neck down through your back and got right down to your pelvis, right in the center of your pelvis, you have several bones that are fused together into your sacrum, and this would be the sacrum. from this Apatosaurus. And this is the first, all of these bones represent the very first Apatosaurus ever found. The name Apatosaurus was created by Marsh to describe this particular specimen that we're seeing. So this is the original and first Apatosaurus. Something else I'd like to point out, this is also from the Apatosaurus, another large bone. This is part of the pelvis, but what I'd like to point out is that it's mounted, or it's placed on a cradle, and this cradle was made individually to hold up that particular bone. And it's I believe it's mostly plaster here, and then right next to the bone, there's a little lining of foam that goes around, and that gives a little bit of support for this bone. And we started creating these individual cradles in around 2012. The museum got a grant to help store our collection in these wonderful compactor shelves, and also with this individual attention to bone by bone. And if we look at the way the bones were stored originally, they were done they were placed on these bags. So when I first started working at the museum a long time ago, all of the bones were stored on these bags. So these are canvas bags, and they were filled with plant material. And the problem with storing bones this way is that they don't give full support to a bone. Any kind of bone that has a curve in it would tend to break under its own weight. So, the grant really allowed the museum to re-support its bones in a really significant way that would help them to be preserved. The museum still has a couple of original collecting specimen boxes that were sent from the West to New Haven, to Marsh. And this is one of those original crates. This is from 1892. And this is the original shipping label that was sent. Sorry. That's easier to read that way. So this is the original shipping label. And this is that bone. It's never been fully excavated from the rock. This is a bone, they think it's from a duck-billed dinosaur, and it's still partially in the sandstone. And then there's been some burlap here, and there's also some grasses, some prairie grasses that were put in to pack around it to preserve it. And so we have just a few of these original crates from the 1800s. The museum still goes out and collects new fossils every year. I don't know if they went out this year. Maybe someone can answer that, like Chris Brenton might know. But here's some specimens that were collected more recently. I think this one might be from 2012. And so the university still goes out and collects new fossils, and they've been doing it ever since Marsh started here in the 1800s. And just if you come in this way, you can sort of see this is not a dinosaur. This is a type of prehistoric reptile named Typothorax. And here you can see the skull, and here's the teeth. This would be where the eye was, and you can see this is an armored reptile with some of the osteoderms there. And this gives you some idea of what the animal would look like, in an illustration. And something that's interesting here is you can see this is still in a plaster jacket. So when this was collected around 2012, it was lined with, and you can see it here, there's aluminum foil right there. There's a little piece of aluminum foil. So this was covered with aluminum foil, and then plaster and burlap were wrapped over it. And this made a field jacket in order to protect the bones and have them safe while they're being moved from Arizona, some petrified forest, to Haven, where Maryland fox, our fossil preparator, would open these up and then lift off the top of the plaster jacket, and then they could begin the delicate work of preparing all of these bones. This is another specimen, and you can see there's a foot bone here. There's a foot of an animal here. And in this case, they use toilet paper to wrap around. And the reason they add the aluminum foil with the toilet paper, they want to make a barrier around the fossil bones so that the plaster doesn't stick to the rock and stick to the bones. So, and so this is a more modern collecting technique. And I see that there's wood here. So there's two pieces of wood that have been sawn off. So these pieces of wood would have been there to reinforce the field jacket. And also these pieces were probably used to help carry it at one point.
Hey, Armand.
Yes.
I got a couple questions in the chat. So a couple people were asking, why is this not a dinosaur, but why is this a reptile instead?
This is going back to the Triassic period. There's a lot of organisms that were alive at the same time. So dinosaurs were not the only animals that were around during the Mesozoic. There were mammals, there were insects, there were lots of other kinds of reptiles. And so this particular type of animal doesn't fit our definition of a dinosaur. So they didn't have the fully upright posture that you'd find in the way we define dinosaurs. That the pelvis would have the structure be slightly different. So these are contemporaries of dinosaurs. They lived at the same time, but they weren't dinosaurs themselves. So if you think about today's world, where you have a big variety of animals alive today, it's the same thing in the Mesozoic. We're sort of the largest, most dominant animals in the Mesozoic were dinosaurs, but there were lots of other organisms alive at the same time.
There's also another question
Yes.
asking, how come you're able to touch the bone without it deteriorating? Does it have some type of barrier, or does it not matter?
Yeah, I don't know if these have been coated with anything. Remember that it's a composite that's mostly rock, and so unlike a bird specimen or an animal skin of a modern animal, there's not a lot of damage you're going to be able to do with your hands when you're touching them. So it's dinosaur bones are generally okay to touch. I suppose when you're collecting specimens like this, if some bones are more fragile than others, and when you're collecting them, they might coat them with some glues that are dissolved in alcohol, where you would spread that over the bones, and that would soak in, and as the alcohol dried out, then the glue would be left inside to help hold on to them. So, some fossils are more fragile than others, and so there's some things I wouldn't touch, but mostly it's okay to handle fossils, and it's a lot different from handling like an animal skin or something where the oils on your hand might cause damage. Let's go over here and take a look. So we have this amazing skull of a duck-billed dinosaur named Lambiosaurus. And these are called duck-billed dinosaurs, not because they're related to ducks, but that they have this flattened beak area in the front of the snout. And this would have been used for grabbing vegetation and then passing it back to these dental batteries. And it has these amazing tooth rows back here. And this is a dinosaur that was capable of doing a lot of food processing, a lot of chewing. And so you had these rows of teeth that are constantly growing up from underneath and behind. You can't really see where they're growing out from. They go from the inside of the jaw out and up, and then they're constantly being ground away with each other. And this process that's right here, this would be attached to muscle that would go up into these openings up here and here, and these would be where it would be opening, closing the jaw, and the teeth would be grinding against each other. And there may have been a little bit of movement possible in the upper jaw that would allow the teeth to not only go a little bit sideways, but forward and back. And so they were constantly processing their teeth. So dinosaurs had ever replaceable teeth. So as long as a dinosaur lived, they had new teeth. And that's very different from ourselves, where we, as mammals, we get two sets of teeth. You have your baby teeth and your adult teeth, and that's it. Another thing that's notable about Lambiosaurus is this large crest on its head. And if you're really familiar with Lambiosaurus, you know that something is missing back here. And there's a little crest of bone that sticks up this way that's broken off on our specimen. So inside here were chambers, hollow chambers that ran up through the crest. And it's possible that these animals made noises with those crests. The crest could have also served a function for something called species recognition, where one of these Lambiosaurs would be able to recognize another Lambiosaur by the crest on its head, so that they know that that was a that was a group that they belonged to. So this is a really beautiful example of one of these duck-billed dinosaurs, and let's compare that to these teeth of a plant-eating dinosaur, an unusual plant-eating dinosaur, to a meat-eating dinosaur over here. And here we have some tooth rows from an Allosaurus. And so this would be a meat-eating dinosaur. You can see they have these curved teeth that are very, very sharp. And these teeth, a lot of them have serrations. They have a little sharp edge that runs up one side and down the other. And so meat-eating dinosaurs all had these sort of serrations. And I don't know if that picks up there on the camera, but there's a sharp edge that runs up and down the other. And then you can see that there are some smaller teeth here and some larger teeth. So this is part of that process where the teeth are lost and regrown. So, for as long as this Allosaurus was alive, it had teeth that would go to be the full size, and then another tooth like this would grow up underneath it, and eventually would push that one out. And for as long as it lived, it had these new teeth coming in. Now, Allosaurus lived at the same time as our Apatosaurus that we looked at earlier, and this is an animal that could have been a possible predator for an Apatosaurus. And here we have the oldest fossils, dinosaur fossils found in Connecticut. And these were discovered in East Windsor. And you can see the bone really stands out. It has this very, very light color compared to this dark sandstone. And this is about 200 million years old. And it was discovered in 1818. So that's before the word dinosaur was even created. So the word dinosaur was created, I think, in 1842 in Great Britain, and this was found in 1818 in Connecticut. So it was found accidentally. It was by a landowner who was blasting out a well on their property in East Windsor. And so they were blasting out the rock, and then, lo and behold, all of a sudden these fossil bones started appearing. And thankfully they were saved. Now, they weren't known to be dinosaurs when they were first discovered, and they thought they might be human bones originally. And then a physician noted that there were some tailbones there, and that this was some kind of an animal. Then in the later 1800s, it was finally recognized as being a dinosaur. And so this is the very, very first fossilized bones of a dinosaur found in Connecticut. Connecticut doesn't have that many dinosaur bones, but we certainly have footprints, and we have thousands and thousands of footprints here in Connecticut. Okay, are there any questions, Jesse? Is it time to think about questions for?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of questions
Okay.
that people have asked. Yeah. So Cain asks, where are most bones found?
Okay, so well, most of the bones that are in the Peabody collection are from North America. Most of the bones were found in the American West, so places like Montana, Colorado, Wyoming. Those are great states to find fossils, and that's where a lot of Marsh's early collections took place, in those western states. But in terms of thinking about the globe, dinosaur fossils are found everywhere. So every continent has yielded dinosaurs. So dinosaurs lived everywhere. So if you look at a map of the world, every continent, even Antarctica, has dinosaur fossils.
All right. Okay, so Rachel asks, are the illustrations normally stored next to the fossils, or are they only there for the tours?
Yeah, so in this case, I would say the illustration is there mainly for tours. And we don't have an idea of what the whole animal looked like.
Where does the term, so Lisa asks, where does the term fossil come from?
Oh, I think it's Latin, and I think it actually comes from, I think it means to dig up, or I think it has something to do with digging up. Basically, it's a little hard to define a fossil. I mean, it's usually the remains of once living organism record of the Earth. And I would include things like frozen mammoths and other. Other questions? Sorry about that. We got disconnected for a second.
Yeah, you guys are back. Linda asks, can dinosaurs be deformed when they are born?
Can they be deformed when they're born? I suppose that would could be for all organisms. There's no fossils of anything like that, but I suppose it's possible that something like that may have happened.
So a couple people do like the Allosaurus. Lisa asks, how long was the lifespan of the Allosaurus? And Andrew asks, do you have the rest of the Allosaurus?
Okay, so we don't have a complete Allosaurus. And the lifespan, I'm not sure if I've ever read a lifespan for Allosaurus. I know that Tyrannosaurus has a lifespan something like 30 years. So, so I think there's been some research in terms of lifespan for a couple of other dinosaurs, but oh, I'm disconnected again. Oh, okay. So there's been a few dinosaurs where there's a lifespan, but I don't know about Allosaurus. That's a very interesting question.
There's another question William asks, are lifelong growing teeth found in modern reptiles?
Crocodiles would be an example that have that same ability to grow teeth for have replaceable teeth. Yes.
Andrew asks, do you have the Dilophosaurus?
I don't think there's any Dilophosaurus in this room. So the room we're looking at is just one area for fossils, and there are other big storage rooms that we're not going to be able to see today that in New Haven and also at West Campus. So our fossils are kind of spread out, particularly during the renovation. And when the museum reopens, a lot of those specimens will move back into the basement of the Peabody Museum.
Brian asks, could you please share the current state of the Apatosaurus versus the Brontosaurus?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ask that again, Adam.
Could you share the current state of the Apatosaurus versus the Brontosaurus?
Oh, okay. So they're very, very closely related organisms, and sort of the most recent analysis of that relationship is that they're two separate animals. The Brontosaurus and the Apatosaurus are different enough in some of their skeletal features that they can have two different names. And so that's the way O.C. Marsh originally designated them in 1877 and 1879. So he named Apatosaurus 1877, and he named Brontosaurus in 1879. So for a long time, other researchers thought that these animals were just, one was just a younger a juvenile of the same type of animal. And then in 2015, I believe, and that's been the most recent analysis, is that they're actually separated as two separate animals. But they would still be very closely related to each other. So they'd be, close cousins, but separate.
Arthur asks, is the room you are in temperature and humidity controlled?
Oh, for the room itself? Yeah. Storing things for a long period of time. Also, not in this room, but in some of the other rooms we have, there's automatic lights that come off and on, so that when somebody leaves the room, the lights go off. And that would be another feature in other collection rooms. So yes, that's very, very important.
Are you able to tell us if any of the fossils in the room will be in the renovated exhibit?
Oh, I'm not positive. I'm not positive which specimens from here are going to be returned to exhibit or going to be on exhibit. So I think that I'm not sure if that's been finally decided or if it's they're still thinking about what specimens to put in there. So I haven't been. I'm not aware of the most recent designs for the hall and what's going to be on exhibit.
Siphone asks, what did the numbers on the teeth of the Allosaurus indicate?
Oh, let's take a look. Okay, so what I'm seeing here. And this is a nice example. If you kind of, can you zoom in on that one right there? So you can see the YPM, and that stands for Yale Peabody Museum. And the PU stands for Princeton University. This specimen used to belong to Princeton University at one time. And then there's a collection number, and that would be, a collection number for the number of that specimen. So all of the specimens here in all the collections have some kind of number on them so that we can keep track of them. And all that information is kept on a database, and you can go to a computer and you'd be able to look up this particular specimen and include it in that information. It'd be like where that specimen is, where it's stored, what it is, and that's a huge help for kind of knowing what your collection is. And it also helps other researchers who are outside of Yale that might want to know what we have. Let's say you're a researcher and you're a student and you live in Colorado or Utah or some other state, and you wanted to study Allosaurus, then you would look online and you would find out what specimens Yale had, and then you could come and arrange to do research on this specimen and the other Allosaurus remains we have.
Cain asks, are fossils and bones the same thing?
So fossils are bones that have been filled with minerals. So they start off as the bones that you're familiar with. If you eat a chicken wing and you find the bones there, if you ever find animal bones outside from an animal that's died and only the bones remain. So these are bones of animals that died in terms of millions of years ago. Their bodies and their bones were buried under layers and layers of sands and muds. Those sands and muds eventually turned into sedimentary rock. And during that process, the bones themselves change and become filled with minerals. So they're sort of like a composite. There may be some of the original minerals of this Allosaurus jaw in there, as well as minerals from when it was buried. So it basically turns into something that feels just like rock.
Sorry, everyone, just give us a few seconds for us to get back up and running. Sorry, everyone, just give us a few minutes to try to figure out our network issues. Um, we will see what's going on and we will address it real quick. Okay, everyone. So unfortunately, there's a problem with the Yale Secure Network, but we thank you anyways for coming to the virtual tour today and enjoying the many fossils that Armin had for display for us. We encourage you guys to watch the video on YouTube in case if there was anything that you might have missed during the live video. There will be a replay on our YouTube channel. And please don't forget to register for next week's tour. That will be next Wednesday at the same time. And that will cover what in the world are herbaria and why do we have them. I will also drop a link in the chat for you guys to register again. Thank you guys again for coming to our tour today, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.